The year's 2024, and unless you're living under a rock, you probably know what video games are. There are a lot of popular games, of all sorts. You can have a game with lifelike graphics, a game about viciously shooting people to death, or whatever this is. But how did we get to this point? Well, to answer that question, we need to go back to the 1950s, where the first video game was created, the game we now know as Pong. At 10 it was called Tennis for Two, and this is how it looked like. Pretty interesting, huh? Well, you're in luck, because in this video I will be going over the entire evolution of video games. But these are just the early beginnings of what we see today as a video game. So let's now visit the 1970s, where Atari creates Pong, becoming the first commercially successful video game.
All three at an exciting low price.
In 1977, Atari releases the Atari 2600, originally known as the Atari VCS, which was the first widely successful home video game console, allowing players to enjoy arcade-style games at home. This is what it looked like, and you could play a variety of games on it, for example, Combat, Adventure, Starship, Street Racer, and much more. It's now the 1980s. Pac-Man is released by Namco, becoming a certified hood classic and opening the door for a lot of sequels, spin-offs, and of course, money. So this is our timeline so far. It's still the mid-80s, but there's some bad news for gaming. Reports state that there is a crash in the market due to oversaturation with low quality games. In other words, shit developers, shit games. And all that led to a decline in the industry. Okay, so to make myself more clear, basically there was a decline in the gaming industry because the market was filled with low quality games that people didn't really enjoy. But then Nintendo came in with a clutch and released the Famicom in Japan, reviving the industry. And later in 1985, Super Mario Bros. Released for the Famicom, becoming one of the most iconic and influential video games of all time.
It's me, Mario!
Like and subscribe or I will hurt you.
6 years later, Sonic is released for the Sega Genesis, rivaling Nintendo's Mario with its insane growth speed. Get it? Cause Sonic goes fast? 2 years later, Doom is released, popularizing the first-person shooter genre and pushing the boundaries of 3D graphics. This might look like your typical low-quality Steam game right now, but keep in mind, this was made over 30 years ago. That's 3 times the age of my average viewer. Later, in 1994, Sony launches the PlayStation, marking its entry into the gaming industry and introducing CD-ROM technology to consoles. This is how it looked like, and here are some PS1 games you could play. Pretty cool, right? 2 years later, Nintendo releases the Nintendo 64, featuring 3D graphics and iconic titles like Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And just like that, we've reached the 2000s, where evolution starts to skyrocket. Reminder, this is what games looked like in the 70s, this is the 90s, and now let's see how they evolved into the 2000s. 2001, Microsoft enters the console market with a box with an X on it. They called it an Xbox, and they featured online multiplayer capabilities through the Xbox Live. In 2004, World of Warcraft is released, becoming a cultural phenomenon and popularizing massively multiplayer online role-playing games, or in short, MMORPGs. Now is where things really start taking off. In 2006, Sony releases the PlayStation 3. Now look at some PS3 games. In 2013, something insane happened. Firstly, I turned 3 years old, but that's not the important part. PS4 and Xbox One. Yippee! In 2017, Nintendo releases the Switch. Pretty cool idea. If you exclude the terrible joystick placements, my hand gets a cramp only by looking at this thing. It's now the 2020s. COVID-19 breaks out and we're fighting for our lives in Fortnite, because there was nothing else to do during the pandemic. Oh, and by the way, PS5 is released, and wow, look at all these bangers. Now, since the 2020s, graphics haven't changed at all. I think we've kind of reached a tipping point, where there's honestly no way to improve the visuals of games. But do you know what we can improve? My subscriber count.